Okay, 40K enthusiasts. I was asked recently a follow-up on some Eldar Footdar units. Some of the Footdar blobs, Footdar units in my list, and that's what I wanted to push up here. But with a qualifier, there are certain limitations, self-imposed limitations, completely on my own in 40K, with how I'm playing the synergy of this list. And if we look really quick at the evolution of my three Eldar armies, I mean, Harlequins still count as Eldar. I was very, very specific in how I wanted to develop them. I started out Sam Han, right? Jet bikes, Vipers, Wave Serpents, Fire Prisms, stuff that's essentially all floating. Everything's flying. Very, very fast. When I then switched over to my Harlequin Army, that's not to say there aren't vehicles or skimmers or fast-moving stuff in that list, but I wanted to build my collection and play an army that had nothing, no models or units that were in my Sam Han Warhost. That was deliberate. That limitation was deliberate because I already have those models. I wanted to play something completely different. And I felt like, well, I knew my player personality. I knew that I'd be wanting to play that list, or I'd be thinking about that list tactically. So then I wanted to do all foot for Eldar, just Eldar Horde, which that right there is a complete antithesis, because one Eldar life is worth 1,000,000 Mon-K on there. More than that. I mean, it's just crazy there with the Infinity Circuit and everything. So playing Horde Eldar and outnumbering your opponent almost to where you're bringing guard-like bodies, Imperial Guard-like bodies to the table, that's interesting, especially when most of your stuff is T3 and much more expensive, and you don't have the big boom tanks, Lehman Russes, and things like that to make up for it. But that's the challenge I wanted. So I specifically did not want to play Wave Serpents or supporting hover-type units in there, because then I might as well play my Sam Han Warhost. So that's kind of the network, the idea behind it. And with this army, the bulk is Guardians on there. For the price, for what they do, they work. But the Guardians in my list, they're not there as the primary attack. They're there as kind of the cleanup crew. They're there hanging out in my deployment zone, getting ready to push forward when my opponent is either weakened enough, I brought down their volume of dice enough. So this is kind of the key with this army. When do you commit? When am I going to commit? When am I going to move forward on there? So we're looking and saying, when have I weakened my opponent's volume of dice, where now I can just flood them with Guardians, or Defenders, I should say, not Storm Guardians, or when, less optimal, when have they committed? When have they locked themselves in to dealing with other units or mission-based objectives that now I can make that push? Not necessarily ideal, but that's kind of the synergy in there. Controlling the center of the table is key. Absolutely key, because I need to be able to dictate the maneuverability, because the army, I mean, they're Eldar on foot, they're fast, but certainly they're not mech'd up type fast or mobile type fast. But I need to cut down my opponent's movement options so I can concentrate my firepower as best I can on certain units. That means using the physical gaming limitations of the gaming table on there, getting into the center of the table, and we looked at this in a previous podcast, why it is so important in 40K. I mean, one could say it's important in every type of miniature game, but 40K, absolutely hands down, you need to control that center. No matter what the mission is, you want to dominate that center. And you do that by essentially sending forward a blob of units. This is where Dire Avengers come in. I make use of Dire Avengers, lots of Dire Avengers, and lots of Fire Dragons. I initially led with the Fire Dragons early on in the development of my list, because Fire Dragons, the one constant in every edition of 40K, and every copy and paste of the Eldar decks that's out there, the one thing that's true about Fire Dragons is they're when you don't know what to do, they're the answer for everything. So if you're really not sure if you have enough volume of dice, Fire Dragons. You need to kind of take out that unit because you think it might be important to your opponent, Fire Dragons. You want to just throw down a little bit of heat, shake up the table a little bit, and see you want to find out really quick where your opponent is going to commit, you put out the fire dragons on there. But the challenge with that was Eldar, resource-wise, they're expensive. Point-wise, power level, they're expensive. I'm pumping all my points into bodies, but still, I need that mass. So what I learned, of course, this is all supported by Space Elf Magics. What I learned was that was a little bit too aggressive. So certainly I have the big groups of fire dragons, but they're back a little bit. What we're going to do is we're going to take Dire Avengers. And, you know, the previous podcast from last week, we explored the best troop choice in 40K. And I say best because there were a number of equations, 40K Dice Hammer equations that went into these choices, meaning compared to the other armies, compared to the primary army, compared to the points of the unit, compared to how big you can bulk it up, compared to the base gun that it has, compared to the stat line of strength, toughness, and initiative and attacks and movement. Taking all that into account, I put forth Necron Warriors. There was, and certainly you guys were very, very passionate, right? 40K community, absolutely passionate. And there were some very, very solid points on there, points that I would say were 100% correct. I mean, ultimately, there is no 100% correct answer. But consistently, and I would have to agree, Dire Avengers, they're beast. They are. And in playing a big blob or two blobs of Dire Avengers, I mean, that's a dangerous aspect right there, losing that. I mean, they take a lot every game, a lot of punishment. I'm wiping out the shrines like crazy on there. That's the unit that I use to send to the center of the table because it's got just enough resiliency, as much as Space Elves can. It's got mad firepower. It's got a lot of flexibility in there. That starts to soften up the numbers. It didn't get my opponent's attention like fire dragons do, but it gets enough, and it forces them to commit. And then on the left, so they get into the center, they shut things down. Left and right side, fire dragons are in wait. Boom, they spring on there. And everyone just you know, it goes down. I am going to lose, but by the time I lose that battle group there, those 2+1, now just the ranks of the Guardians come forward and take the day, whether that's shooting, whether that's launching just a mass assault on there. Backed with Psychics, that gives me the volume of dice, and that gives me the initial punch to do very well with the army. So I hope that answers the question, pushing that up there. Underneath this video in the info box is a link back to my blog. You can search there, Footdar. You can see the other elements in this army. You can see kind of some of the other tactics with how the units work together. Again, one way. And certainly you might be like, well, Fritz, what about adding this unit? Or what about playing these units here? Or what about adding some mobility? Absolutely. It'll only make the army concept even better. There are some serious limitations to this. Again, because I wanted it to be completely separate, distinct in flavor, personality, and playstyle compared to my other two Eldar armies.